Hi folks, this is Ask the Master on ICC TV. I'm International Master John Watson, and the idea of this show is that you can ask me questions about chess and the chess world. Uh, we often ask questions about books and games and primarily about openings. I'm always getting questions about openings. The idea is that this is an opportunity without having to hire a teacher or go run off and find a grandmaster somewhere. You can ask a question of someone fairly competent about any real sort of questions in the chess world. Many of you have been here before. I just got a chat question here. Okay, so there's a few ways of asking these questions. The first one you have to know is the email, and that's the best one because you really get a chance to think about your question. You can send a game with it. You can attach a game with it. You can uh, decide how to word it carefully. You can also send me a comment or just something you'd like mentioned on the show, which about chess that might be interesting. At any rate, those emails go to askimwatson@chessclub.com, AskImWatson @chessclub.com. That's an ICC email, and you can also message me at my ICC handle, which is John L. Watson, L as in lion, JOHN LWATSON. That's if you're an ICC member. And one of the best ways is to ask a question on the chat. I see a few people already on the chat, and you can ask me anything there. Most of you have been through the spiel before, so I think I'll just kind of plunge right in here. I wanted to also mention, I keep forgetting to mention that these the openings that we've covered, and there's usually 8 or 9 or 10 openings that we cover each show, are listed by ECO code and by name on my Facebook page, John L. Watson. So you can go there and look at my, I guess it's called the timeline, and you'll see that I've posted a big list of all of them, and then I tend to update those week by week, but I've just recently put the big list on. So you'll be able to see all the old shows going back a couple of years to see which openings we've covered already so that you can, well, catch up. But also, if you want to ask a question, then you'll already know whether we've discussed it once before. Okay, having said all that, I wanted to talk about last week's chat briefly before I get to this week's. Because I was really wrong about something. Max Yarmolinsky asked me this question, and I did get the question. It was about the Petrovs with knight c3. This is the Petrov defense. And then he kept asking me, he kept trying to correct me because I was giving answers. The question was, do you think that black should castle kingside or queenside in the 5 knight c3 line of the Petrov? And I'm scrolling down through the chat and I read too quickly, and I just assumed he meant should white castle kingside or queenside. And I kept saying, well, probably queenside. And he, I think twice made the point, tried to stop me and said, no, I mean should black castle kingside or queenside, but unfortunately I was already scrolled down through the chat and I missed that. So anyway, so I got a game up. It's a good question. It's a very interesting question. Most of the lines that have been played historically, black has gone kingside, but in some of the most important lines, and in particular the one that Max was thinking about playing anyway, black has been going queenside. So let me just show you, this is a game between Bashir Lagrave as white and Fabiano Caruana as black, two of the top players of the world, both over 2,800. And let me just show you how that went. This is the normal move, bishop e7. And as I explained last week, white's trying to play this castle, get his pieces out quickly, maybe play c4. But also a lot of times he'll try to throw the queenside pawns at black on the king side. So if black castles king side, he's sort of walking into that attack. That's okay. Black doesn't have any weaknesses, but still, one option is to try to go queen side. And so recently, people have been playing this way. And for quite a while, they went this way, and white's results actually got better and better and better with this. I'm not saying it's a bad move, but one of the ideas is to put the knight on c5 and castle king side. And maybe that's where this new plan started coming from, because white was starting to pile up on the king side and get some pretty quick attacks. I mean, this is quite playable for black, but I did notice there's been a lot of games switching to this move instead, and the idea is this way this bishop can get out too, and this queen can come up and you can castle queen side, or at least that's one of the main ideas. Okay, so now bishop g4 is a very common move here. I'm not going to analyze any of this stuff. I do have notes. I don't even see the notes. Well, I'll do it without notes. It's not that important. We're just getting some ideas here, and I'll just show you the game. And if I don't get the tactics right, that's okay. Be nice if I could do that, but I don't see it. Let me see. Well, we'll just have to wing it here. Okay. Well, and the idea there is that a lot of times white will let black take in order to, and white gets two bishops, but it's the same setup for black that he plays here and then castles this way. Okay, now I think bishop e6 is probably more accurate. It's been played by some awfully good players, including Caruana, as we see here. And that's that move. And then white castles, and although white has made other moves too, maybe in order to stop this bishop takes move, or not allow bishop takes. So he asked about this move bishop takes here, and I noticed that it's been played in a lot of games. I'd never seen it when he first asked about it. I made some speculations. I like the solution I came up with that had to do with playing c4 and queen c3, or queen d3. But most of the analysis goes like this, and apparently if white plays perfectly, not too surprising, but anyway, if white plays perfectly in these attacking positions, he actually ends up getting this position has actually worked out for white, believe it or not, even though black has quite what looks like quite an attack. White should survive and be a piece up, apparently. That seems to be the consensus. So black isn't maybe taking as much anymore, I'm not sure. Maybe black's improved on that, but in any case, I don't trust that move. It'd be better to play that if your opponent had never seen it, and I guess it's been played in quite a few games by now. So what does that mean? That means that black can also just castle, just play normal moves and get castle development. Why should he stand worse? White's got slightly freer development. He's a little ahead in development, but he's got not great pawns, and black stands very solidly with no pawn weaknesses. So you would think black would be okay here. And white plays there now to protect the a7 pawn, maybe play king b2, maybe supports c4. And black castles queenside. And the question, in this game white played here, centralizing. Part of the question was about, I noticed on the chat, he mentioned something about bishop b5 moves, and saying that those were awkward. And I can see that that could be true, that would be an issue, because if for one thing knight d4 might become a threat pretty quickly to totally destroy black's queenside and then attack over there. But in this exact position, I think you can just go ahead and attack this, which by the way protects the a7 pawn, and have no particular problems here. This seems to be perfectly okay. I mean, white can still take this. It's an interesting position, but I don't think anything special is going on here. So the other question would be, well, when else could you play bishop b5? Well, I suppose you could play it now, but for one thing, that means black could go kingside again, because he hasn't committed. This bishop isn't even aiming at the king side, and maybe it's a little silly sitting out there on b5. But the other thing you can do is just attack it immediately. So I'm not so sure bishop b5 gives you problems, but maybe I'll try to look at that more carefully this week, because I didn't get time to fully investigate this variation. But that would be my instincts, is no, black's fine castling queenside, and Caruana knows his openings better than probably anybody in the world, including all these top, incredibly well-prepared players. So he probably knows exactly what he's doing. Okay, so white played knight d4, and let's just take a look at this. This is a case where black castled queenside. So I guess to answer the question, though, I would say in most lines black castles kingside, but in this fairly recent idea of playing knight c6 with the bishop either here or here, black's been castling queenside, and I think he's right to do so, because it gets rid of white's main idea of just throwing all these pawns forward on the king side. This strikes me as a pretty good defensive system. White took that. Now white's got the two bishops, so white really should stand maybe very slightly better here. But the thing is, this is a 2-0 central majority, and that's usually pretty much cancels out the bishops. And also, this is maybe a little bit weak over here, so, or could be a problem, maybe in the endgame, for example. I still think white's maybe a tiny bit better here, but not enough to worry about terribly much. That's a very good move because the bishop here is coming. But I want to show you how Caruana solved this problem. The threat is bishop here and then rook over here, and pretty soon it's going to be hard to even defend that square. And if you start playing moves like e5, that bishop's going to get on that long diagonal anyway and cause all kinds of trouble. For example, I mean, let's say you played it, I don't know, right away. Maybe white would play here to play bishop h3, and the bishop would come in, and I don't think anybody likes this for black. This is kind of a bad bishop now, too, behind its own pawns. So look how Caruana solves this. This is really instructive, I think. This is, let me see. So we have this move. He plays d5, which of course is consistent with having this bishop coming out and being stronger. However, it looks kind of weird because it makes that pawn even more pinned and backwards. So you might think, what's going on here? But look what happens here. Okay, natural moves. He's already threatening to take. Maybe, for example, bishop takes, and then queen takes. Let's say white did a terrible move. Something. Well, wait a minute. Let's say black did a terrible move. Sorry, something like this. Well, this would work already, I think. Check, and you've won the queen for just 2 pieces. So looks like white's just doing great here, but Caruana has this little method worked out. He may have worked it out before the game began even. He simply plays this move, and now the trick doesn't work, because if bishop takes, queen takes, bishop check, can take that either way, rook takes, check, and black has way more than enough for the queen. And in fact, I'm sorry, he could even, this is very good for black, but even better, come to think of it, now that I see this, is to play check first, and then just take with the rook and be a piece ahead. Okay, so that's why rook he8. So Vasily Lagrave, as I say, is a 2800 player. He's not going to fall for that. So he tries to sort of blockade the central squares. And Caruana gets his bishop. Now notice, as opposed to the line we looked at earlier where the pawns were here the bishop has great scope. So so I think black's pretty much equal here, because this is not a great piece. It's an okay piece. It's got a lot of scope, but black's minor pieces are about as good as white's are, and black has this nice central majority. So once again, about even. Pretty soon black was better in this game. I could even stop here, but I think I'll just keep going for a little while. Just to show you kind of how the play developed. And all of a sudden black's kind of breaking through in the center. So this really didn't work out the way that white wanted it to. White did manage to, okay, very clever attacking, but maybe too clever. Maybe it turns out this game was drawn, and let me just show you how that worked. It happened very quickly, actually. Now it's just knight versus bishop. There's not enough pieces to checkmate here, and this pawn is very hard to advance by itself. So the game was drawn pretty quickly. Let me just show you that. Well, not that quick. Oh, here it is. So there was sort of a repetition of threats here. And that was it. That was a draw. Kind of cool. The answer to the question is basically in this variation, yeah, bishop e6, queen d7, castles queenside looks safe to me, and a very good plan. Okay, let's go to the chat. Let's go to the chat. Hi, John. Would you be able to do a quick overview of the winner played by Petrosian? b6, queen e7, and the cute-looking move, queen d7, and the kind of cute-looking move, bishop f8. Thanks. Yeah, we actually talked about this a little bit, and I even gave an example or two of this in an earlier lecture, maybe just one example. But okay, that's obviously something for probably next week, because it would take too long. I'd have to organize a nice little thing on it. So I'll try to throw that in there. I try not to promise too much. Okay, here's the winner variation of the French. What he's talking about is after the immediate e5, black has 2 ways to get into positions that have b6, and then either bishop b7 or bishop a6, and usually the structure he's talking about, let me just show you. The 2 ways to do it are queen d7 and b6 immediately. So let's just throw one of those in. Let's just try b6, and after a3 coming back. Now you can still play the system against this too, but we're really talking about this line. And why does he retreat? Because he's already done what he wanted to do, is provoke white into playing e5. That's the idea. And also this way now white can't play queen g4 with tempo against that pawn, as he often does. So let me just make some more moves here. Let's say white goes here and black develops, and white goes here. I'm just going to make moves, and black develops. And it's very odd because he just blocked off his own c-pawn, but he has an idea. And his idea is to castle queenside. This is something that Petrosian and Bronstein played several games with, very famous games, beautiful games, winning mainly because they were chess geniuses more than because the system is so great, but it doesn't really matter. Anyway, here's the basic structure he's talking about. The basic structure is this. One great idea here is that if white ever attacks on the queen side, which he'd like to do, let's just put this knight somewhere. I don't know where it should be, but let's just throw it somewhere. If white ever attacks this way with c4, let's say black makes some medium moves too. And then when black takes this, well, actually this pawn's hanging, but let's even pretend it wasn't hanging. Let's make a couple extra moves here. When black takes that, this bishop is freed. So white's most natural attack on the center opens up this beautiful bishop on this long diagonal, which also opens up an outpost on d5, and it's an outpost in front of an isolated backward pawn. So that tends to be a very good combination of black. The outpost in front of the backward pawn plus the long diagonal. And a position like this, therefore, is probably about equal, even though white has open lines and more space in the center and an open line against the king. Black's pieces are just so well placed that this is probably okay. So that's sort of your basic idea, because c4 is the basic way to break down a center like this. You're not going to get f5 in, and even if you did, since black's on the queen side, castle's on the queen side, playing f5 risks opening up white's own king side. So white has to figure out another method of attacking, and often that'll be something with b4 and a4 and a5. A lot of times he'll try to exchange off this bishop, but it's very odd because this is a bad, he took all this time to get a bad bishop and to block off his own pawn, which is normally attacking the center in the French, and yet it's a system that's been used quite a lot. Gulko played it regularly or irregularly for quite a few years. I even saw him play it once. I think I was telling this story against one of the top US juniors and thinking, how can he get away with playing this as black against somebody, you know, that strong? And once again, he got, I think he got the worst game, but then ended up winning anyway. It's a fun system. So yeah, so I probably will do that, some of that next week. Let me copy. If I don't, remind me to do it. I'll try and copy the chat and remember. So let me show you the other way that happens, by the way. Whoops. The other way that happens is sometimes black plays this move. And the idea of that move is that if he goes here, it's the same thing. You're going to come back, and then he's going to make moves, and you're going to play b6 and here, and knight c6 and castle's queenside. The other idea of queen d7, which is kind of interesting, is that if white plays queen g4 attacking this pawn, you have f5 or f6 because the queen now defends that g pawn. And you want to play f5 or f6 anyway. In this case, I wonder if f6 is a good move. I've kind of forgotten. I think f5's been played a bunch, but f6 might even be more interesting here than it usually is because you're going to play like this, put your queen here and put your bishop here maybe. Sort of like a Hecht Riefschläger. Anyway, but f5 is the normal move there. Now let me show you the difference between that and b6 right away. After b6 right away, I only showed you a3. But very common is to play a move like this, queen g4, and now that pawn has to be defended some other way. And that's why, again, we see this move bishop f8. So there's the bishop f8 idea. So that's the difference between playing b6 or queen d7 on the fourth move, but often they get to the same position and they have the same ideas. All right. Hello, everybody. Queen d7. Yeah, we got that. Very good. Good question, by the way, as usual. I'll try and get to more of that next week. Chess philosopher, is the move order c4, e6 going into a knight's tango playable? Is it better to save e6 later? What are the nuances involved? Great question. Let's talk about the knight's tango. Wonderful opening, by the way, and I don't think it's at all refuted yet, although I do like playing against it when I'm white, I have to admit. Okay, so here's the order he's talking about. He's saying going into a two knights tango. The problem is this doesn't really go into a two knights tango necessarily. Two knights tango is if the knight gets here and the other knight goes here. That's why it's called a two knights tango. It's normally played in this order though. Well, there's really two orders, but the main order I would say is this one. Like that, without committing to either e6 or d6 or d5 or e5. So after the two knights tango, let me just real quick show you what some of the normal moves are. If white plays there, black will often, for example, play here. And then after white plays here, black can come back and swing over here. Common idea. Black, because if now white had played here, I'm sorry, what was I trying to say? But yeah, but that's the idea if white plays knight c3 first. If white plays knight f3 first, you can't play e5 anymore, but you can play e6. And now the idea is maybe bishop b4, which might transpose into a Zurich variation of the Nimzo-Indian, or might just have independent significance. And so that's one way. And then white often plays this move just to stop bishop b4, followed by knight c3. Very common line. Okay, so the question is, his question is, how about playing e6 first? And now we've talked about this position a little bit. You can go back into normal lines like that. Those are the main lines of d4 chess in the Indian world. Or you can play this, which is a English defense, which we've talked about a little bit. I've played that a lot, and my students have played that a lot too. Or you can play bishop b4 check, which can lead to several different lines, but it's an interesting, flexible move that many people play. And one of the ideas is, for example, here. The other is queen e7. There's various possibilities here. And the question, well, of course, you can also play main lines with like a Benoni defense, like that. It's a modern Benoni. or Queen's Gambit declined. That's a standard Queen's Gambit decline. So there's all kinds of options here. He's asking about this move. The problem is it's not really a two knights tango yet. So if you played here and here, you'd have a standard main line, one of the main lines of the two knights tango. So what are White's options here? Well, one thing White could do, and I'm hesitating because I'm not sure if it's a good move. One thing you can do is go here first, and now if Black plays that move, well, yeah, this is interesting. Let me see. I was going to say bishop b4 would be my preference, probably. It would be sort of the normal move, but then you have to deal with that move, which you normally don't do when your knight's already here. And I don't know if White's better here or not, but I suspect White's a little happy with it, possibly happy with this move order. This is a fairly good move order. Actually, though, I'm not quite sure if he can't play there right away. Let's think about that. One idea here would be to just play here. And then if bishop b4, okay, this kind of position is well known to be pretty good for White. This is considered a pretty good position. So is actually this one right away. I think might be a better way to do it. My fault, yeah. And then maybe knight f3, threatening bishop d3 or queen c2. White has a small advantage probably, even after bishop b4. So yeah, I think e4 would be a bit of an issue because bishop b4 is the natural move, but White's already gotten e4 in, so either e5 and even the queen g4 move might be an issue here pretty soon. Actually, you've got to protect this first, so I guess queen here. It's messy. I guess it's okay. Yeah, that looks okay. A little unclear. Or maybe a slower move here, like for example, f3. This move I wonder about going here because now you have queen g4 ideas. Yeah, this is probably very good because queen g4 is going to attack that square and that square once this knight moves. Okay, so maybe bishop d3 would be a good move. Complicated, very complicated. Terrific question. I'll check it out. Anyway, I think my initial response is there's some move order problems that mean you can't get into the direct Knights Tango variation. The move order main one would probably be this. Now, if he plays here now, that might be a little bit of an issue too. I'm just trying to think. Okay, so now probably back to this move. And now here. And you can't get that e5 move in. And if you play d5, you've got one of those queen's gambits where your knight's in front of the pawn, which is not that terrible, but probably a little better for White. So it does seem like maybe there's some move order issues with these two right next to each other before you play knight f6. I don't think this is a problem. I don't know why. It looks overextended. How about just here? Now this move really tends to be overextended. For one thing, you can take that safely, even though you're attacking it. These positions tend to be quite sound. You know, just move the knight here or b6 or something. Okay. Hope I'm not winging this answer too much, but I don't trust these two moves quite together. But if you play d5 immediately, I think Black's probably okay. For example, if you defend it that way, then Black can check or even play bishop c5, because this kind of move this is a well-known kind of position here. Actually, not quite sure. Maybe I should have taken this first. Should have taken that first probably. Okay, anyway, I'm not going to waste everybody's time because I'm not real sure, but I don't think d5 worries me too much. Black gets pretty good active play. Bishop b4 check, bishop c5, then I can retreat back to here if it needs to. But I would worry about a3 as a problem, and I would worry about e4, which maybe bothers me more than anything actually, or knight c3 and e4. Knight c3, and regardless of whether he plays bishop e4 or knight f6 e4. As well as e4 right away. Okay, so I hope that's a bit of an answer. So basically, if you want to play the Knights Tango, you probably want to play knight f6 and knight c6. There are even people who play knight c6 and they aren't afraid of the Nimzowitsch defense, although I think White's better there. And then after that, they play here. That's the two Knights Tango, formally speaking. That's what you'll find. Okay. Let me see. We got here? What's your opinion? Oh, I have a Queen's Gambit accepted question that I finally have answered. It's going to be the next thing, actually. Not talking about specific lines, but in the opening in general, it seems like everybody is recommending Nimzo's Queen's Gambit declines, Grunfeld's, and even the Dutch. Is there some problem with it? Not really. We did talk about that a little bit, that there are a couple of lines I think that White is doing pretty well in. I asked you this last week, but ran out of time. Would you be able to discuss some tips or themes in symmetrical pawn structure endgames? That's a little tough, but I'll think about that. That's pretty. Oh, ABC versus NFGH. Okay. Yeah, we can talk about that. I may delay on that and get to some other questions first, especially since other people are asking things. Bishop h6 version of the Maroczy. Yeah, we got that question before too. Okay, yeah, Tiviakov played that Bishop h6. So I guess the first question is, what about the Queen's Gambit accepted? And I think I'll segue that into this question that I got, a very interesting question. In a recent here's the question. In the recent QGA book by Delchev and Semkov, they make a strong case for the Queen's Gambit accepted. Let me just put this up. Yeah, this is partly an answer to your question too. There's a brand new book by Delchev and Semkov about recommending the Queen's Gambit accepted. So that's kind of cool. And they're strong players and they're very interesting. He says their analysis first of all, everybody, this is what the Queen's Gambit accepted is. There's the Queen's Gambit, that's declining it. That's the Slav of defense. And this is the Queen's Gambit accepted there. Okay. He says in this line, their analysis in this line is especially concerning to me. Okay, that's this one. Okay, now let me talk about this for a second. Queen's Gambit accepted. Before I get to his specific question, maybe it would be better. Although actually, let me finish his question. It's kind of cool. He says that they're especially concerned. This is especially concerning for us mainline white players. In other words, Delchev and Semkov have suggested this. He's a little worried about this. Even Carlsen seems to be concerned since he has tended to play 3e3. Okay, 3e3 is an option which sometimes transposes when you play knight f3 later. If black plays knight f6 now, for example. But he says e3, e5 does not seem to disturb black that much either. That's the traditional move e5. We mentioned it before on this show, but let's assume that's true for a moment. I think that may actually be true, that black's doing reasonably well in these lines. He says, isn't it time to admit that white needs to switch to 3e4 before making the Queen's Gambit a real gambit and increase his winning chances? We also talked about those b5 ideas. I don't know if you remember those. And he's asking, well, what about, maybe it's time to just admit that you should play there. And last time I got this question, I took a look at the e4 lines, and I thought black was okay in these positions. There's a whole bunch of main lines here, but with, for example, this and here and takes in here, and then playing for moves like knight c6 and bishop e6 and things like that. And then the other thing you can do, I think I mentioned on this show, some of the older lines, this is of course a main line too. This one I always used to like playing for white. I used to play e4 for white. One line that I think is underrated, I think we talked about two lines here that might be underrated, and one of them was b5 right away, but the other one was this. I think if you go back and look at the theory of these lines, it's white doesn't necessarily have any advantage at all here if black plays correctly, I think. So yeah, e4, maybe it should be looked at again, but I don't see it being really popular right now. So I'm a little skeptical of whether people really believe it's that strong. Obviously, it can't be bad, can it? Another famous line is going here. I don't know how this stands right now, but there's b5 ideas sometimes in these kinds of positions. And if e5, b4, I think. This is some old, really old analysis. What else do we have? Well, anyway. So yeah, okay, so I guess I'd say in general, before I get to the question about the bishop g4 line, about this and bishop g4, which is worrying him, I wanted to mention some of the main lines, the traditional main lines, which go something like this. Takes, c5, attacking back in the center, and this has been played in tens of thousands of games. It's still considered the main line, and sometimes white will play a4 and queen e2 and rook d1. We talked about this. We've talked about this several times. If you go back over some old shows, you can look this up on the YouTube shows. And what I mentioned before is that I think there are a couple interesting variations here. One is this move bishop b3, which Avruch recommends in his book. So that would be one question that any Queen's Gambit accepted player better really look at this line, because white gets a lot of good attacking chances. Kasparov played this. Almost a lot of the top GMs have played this as white. And another one that I mentioned, just because it's a favorite of mine, is what I recommend in my book. My book, Strategic Chess Opening Repertoire for White, gives this move bishop there. And the idea is that if he goes here, you can actually play slowly in this position. But the main idea is that when you go, you can make that move and break up the queen's side. And if he pushes, then you have this square and a free hand to play e4. If you go back over earlier lectures, you'll see that I talk about this a little bit. And I think I gave an example of it. So usually black doesn't do that. Usually black isolates the pawn. And there are quite a few games that white has good practical results in this position. That doesn't mean he stands better, but he has good practical results in this isolated pawn position. But you can argue that black's equal if he plays carefully. So maybe this is not a real disincentive. I'd be very careful about this though, because there's a lot of tactical wins white has. White can sacrifice pawns in the center. I don't know how many of you have seen this variation before, but a lot of times there's an e4, e5 idea after he takes here, for example. And so that would be my recommendation to look into if you want to play the Queen's Gambit accepted. The thing that's worrying the person who asked this question, which is, who asked this question? Do I have his name? John Dowling asked this question. The thing that's worrying him is this line. And I just thought I'd show this game. Let me look at some notes here. Okay. By the way, Sakhaev, who is the co-author here of this book, I'm sorry, it's not Sakhaev. Let me look at this. Anyway, I didn't find a lot of examples by the authors in these lines. I saw a few. I saw a few of Delchev. He had 6 games out of 2,200, but he's much more of a Queen's Gambit decline player. He's played a bunch of King's Indians, a lot of Nimzo Indians. So he's only played a few games with this, so that worried me a little bit. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. You can write, especially a strong player like he is, can write about a line that he doesn't play. But I would say that it's not something that it would make me more comfortable if he'd played it a lot and was really established with it and had really good results, because so far bishop g4 in chess history, of course, hasn't done that well. So it becomes a matter of more analysis than actual concrete play. So I just thought that concrete examples. So let me just show you some analysis. This can be played. Okay, knight c3. Could be played also, and after knight here, h3, and this will transpose if you go here now. So in this game, he plays h3. Now, first thing to know is that this kind of position really is very good for white. He's got a 2-0 central majority. He's not even behind in development. Usually when you give up the bishop pair, you at least gain a lead in development. I mean, maybe you have a tiny lead here if you consider the queen not a very good piece to have out, but nothing special. And here's just one quick example. You're threatening that pawn. Knight here is risky because there's going to be a bishop b5 move at some point with a lot of pressure. So c6 has been played, but white just has a nice center. He's going to play for e4, probably rook d1 and e4. Yeah, here we go. Knight c3, rook d1, and then e4 next, basically. This is not a very desirable position. You know, knight here, here, and don't even hesitate. And you have the center and 2 bishops. So bishop f3 really I think is just a mistake. So what they recommend is bishop h5, and white develops and black plays here. Now in the old days they used to play knight c6 sometimes, but that's been well worked out. You can look up in the books for that. You can look in my book for knight c6 lines. Another main move Delchev played himself is a6 first. And his opponent played b3. So I think I I think I'll skip that. He got a pretty decent game after that. So I checked out what they say in their book. There's a very famous Kasparov game that goes like this. It's actually kind of a cool game, a cool idea. Kasparov now went back again here. It's always given an exclamation point. It's in a lot of books, naturally, Kasparov's so famous. And then he played bishop there, and the bishop was very effective on the long diagonal, and white had two bishops. The problem is that that's really slow. And Semkov and Sakaev, is that right? I hope I didn't get the names wrong. But anyway, the authors thought that black was okay in this position. I guess I can sort of believe that. It's a little slow for white, even though it's been quoted as being better for white in practically every book. But so he's not afraid of that. That's why he plays a6. So white plays castles, and black plays c5 at this point. Oh, I'm sorry, knight c6. If he plays c5, which had been mentioned in some books, I think this is just better for white. It's true you get these doubled pawns, but the two bishops in the ending are awfully nice. It's not tons better. This has been called equal, but actually Semko. Let me just see here. Delchev, in that book, they even say they think that black will suffer against white's bishops. And I think they give b3, knight c6, bishop b2, and then f4 next. That kind of position is no fun to play at all. So even though that's been called equal in some source, I don't really believe it. So c5, so the idea of a6 is to play knight c6 and without allowing bishop b5. This move bishop b5 is really, really awkward if a6 is not in, because there's too many times when you can play bishop b5 and knight here and queen a4, and you can lose pawns very, very easily. Okay, so that's why he plays first a6, and then he plays knight c6. So here we are in a sort of a standard setup for black, but I just don't think it's that good. Here's a good solution. Just unpin that. And black plays here. It's Pelletier-Brunel. And they give this in their book. But I think this is quite a good move. Just a very simple move. You're trying to use your central majority. And they give this move, because otherwise white's just better in the center. But they don't mention this move. And then I give a bunch of variations. How are we doing for time here? Maybe I won't go through the variations, but if you look at this, I think you'll find that white is somewhat better here. And if he does play the more natural looking move, bishop here, then look at this position for a second. You'd think this would be equal, but look, center pawns are very strong, and there's no c5 attack on the center. There's only e5. And e5 is going to be hard to get in without allowing a bunch of open lines here. So the best move is probably here, and then white can come back, and here, and then black goes somewhere, and white goes here. Black might go to d8. But anyway, this position is white just has more space, and this is a fairly passive bishop. This is a good one. So I just like white here. It's not tremendously better, but it is better. So let's quick go back to the game. Let me see what else we got here. Look at this, the chat just real briefly here. Did you get my email? I'm not sure. I probably did. I've gotten emails from you before. What do you think of the Yurosov gambit? Oh, we've talked about that already. At some great length, actually, but we can do it again. I'll write all this down. I do want to get to stuff that I was asked last week and things people sent me, though. And here's a variation of the elephant that we can look at. Okay, cool. So let's just continue this. Okay, so knight there. To me, this is much more important. And this is the old main line, and it goes on. There are some piece sacrifice ideas where white ends up playing for something like this happens. Let me just show you roughly how this goes. I think there's mass exchanges here, if I remember right, and then f4. And black would be losing a piece to f5, except that this is check. And I think he goes to h2 or something. And then he has to take here. You take back, and the problem is you can't take on that square without losing a piece anyway. So this position ends up being better for white. You can see this in my book, for example. I analyze this in my book, Strategic Opening Repertoire for White, and it's in plenty of other books too, although I think I do a more thorough job, but it doesn't really matter. Once in a while, people try to revive that line. But the Delchev book, they include, they switch to this move, and And now they say A3 exclamation point. But I think, and that probably is a decent move, although they think black's equal or they wouldn't be recommending it. I think that might be a very good move. I'm not really afraid of bishop takes f3 at all. So here, for example, queen e7 or c5. Obviously, if he takes this right away, if he does anything like this right away, you can play queen takes b4, and that's fantastic because this bishop's hanging, and black can't castle, and so this is just a good position. There's also tactical issues. So queen e7 or c5 would be the main moves. If queen e7, I think one way to do this is just get out of the way of bishop takes f3 and play there. And I think that this position favors white, but so does, I think, just here. Takes, takes. Now we're on that square. And if he takes, white's got the bishop pair in a huge center to make up for his weaknesses, and they really aren't bad weaknesses at all. There's no way to attack white's king, and in the meantime, guess what? Bishop a3 coming. This is not fun. Now, black can play this. It's not the end of the world, but it's no fun. The center is very strong. And also, there's ideas on the G file, too. You can even play f4, too. So this is, you just have to get used to positions like that. So I don't really believe, I think queen b3 is quite a good move. c5 would probably be the other move. And then I think d5 is pretty good. Because if bishop takes, you've got this problem. You can look at that for a while, but it's just very good for white. Positionally, very, very good. And if pawn takes, which is forced, I guess, and then he tries to double these pawns. Whoops. This is a very awkward position. This guy's hanging, so he probably is going to end up taking this. But now this is hanging, so he's probably going to castle. And then I'm just going to attack that bishop. And now I just want to play a simple move like this to keep his queen out of g5. This is a very friendly position. I've got two pieces on there. I'm ready to use the g file. And just in general, this is difficult for black to defend. I think black will not enjoy this at all. White's got that long diagonal to defend the king side, by the way. So he can always put a bishop on g2 if he needs to. Okay, so that's just a basic two bishop position. But they say a3. They want you to play a3 there. And now they think black is doing fine. But I actually think that this is quite a good move, just threatening to play e4. There are two pieces on e4, and now normally black in a position like this will play here. But now I just want to move this away and play knight d2 and threaten to get the bishop pair or get e4 in. And I think you'll find that kind of position is very is favorable for white. Not heavily favorable, but favorable, because the two bishops really start meaning something once that e4 is played and this bishop is freed. Okay, so there's something against the Queen's Gambit there against Bishop g4. It doesn't ask your Collins general question about the Queen's Gambit accepted, but that's my answer to what's going on in that line. I don't think white need be afraid at all of Bishop g4. I don't think what they say in this book is sufficient to equalize for black. Let me put it that way. Although it's fine to play. Nobody's going to play perfectly against you, and you're never losing or anything. So you could play this. You could play their way for black, but I'd rather be white. Okay, let me keep going. See if I can get some sort of order here going. I did want to show somebody's game because I keep forgetting. When people send me games, I want to make sure I get a chance to show them. So let me do that before I answer the next chat questions. I'll show a game, then we'll do the next chat question. I'm going to reward people for sending games because I think it's a fun thing for everybody to see. It takes a little bit of nerve to do it. And but as long as I think they're instructive, having problems here. 4, boom. Okay, here we go. So this is, what do I have here? This is Colin McCaffrey's game. He says, I played this in the 45 Lichess League. I gave up too much material for a queen. I thought I played it pretty well. I was hoping you'd be able to give advice how to play queen versus pieces, which I think is a great question and comes up all the time in real chess. So he's white, and it's a Benko Gambit. That's not a particularly good move, by the way, if you want to learn a little opening theory. At least I don't think it's a very good move. The better moves here are, well, you can play e6 and you have a Blumenfeld gambit, which we've talked about now several times on this show. That's a transposition. You can play g6. That's probably the most normal move. And some people play bishop b7 here. So, and even b4 has been played. I don't know if I trust it, but I believe it's also been played sometimes. Okay, so in this game he plays there. The problem with that is it means the knight can get here without being attacked by b4, which means e4 can't be stopped. And as far as I know, every line favors white in these positions. So you have a big center now. Now he's really afraid of e5, so he plays d6, which is very natural, but white just plays e5 anyway. So Colin is playing very well here. And now you've established white has a strong pawn here. He's going to get that pawn back. He's got an open file to work with. And he's not even behind in development, so this is great. Okay, white takes. Do I have any notes here on any of this? Oh, just if you don't play bishop g7. If you try to challenge the knight, you've got that problem. You don't want that. And if you try to challenge the knight this way, you've got this problem. That knight is beautifully placed in front of an isolated pawn and an open file. That's a knight. That's a good blockader. And it means that moves like d6, bishop f4 are coming. This is just good because black's cramped. So black did the right thing by going there. White captures. Black played here. I think he has a computer. Yeah, okay. White played here. Black played here. He gives us a question exclam. I think he's using a computer engine here. But anyway, the computer engine mentions this move, but actually I think that might be a real problem because of that move, which normally doesn't seem to be anything, but here it's actually very difficult. It's not so much that he's threatening to get his material back, he's threatening to get his material back and another rook with queen d5 or queen f3. He's threatening to get, so he's a piece down for a pawn, but he's threatening queen f3, queen d5, and other things. And there are many things black can try here, but they're all pretty bad. Queen b3 is a move too. For example, if that, you can end up just playing check, and then take the bishop. So I don't believe knight at d7, by the way, just for the record here. Typical tactics, by the way. Okay, so bishop e7 was played, and then bishop e3. Now queen b3 is probably a better move, and white really has the advantage after queen b3, I think, but we'll just keep going on here. It's a small mistake. He correctly criticizes queen c7 and says, now you should play knight d7. That's true, because there's no tactics now. Get rid of that powerful knight. And I think that white's maybe just slightly better here. Position like this. It's a pretty good move. Having not played that queen b3 move, things are looking a little bit better for black, but you still have moves like bishop g5, rook e1. This square is kind of hanging. It's not fun. White's still better, but at least black's hanging in there logically. Instead he played there, and white retreated, which is a kind of an odd move. He mentions the move, which the engine, of course, immediately gives, which is d6, and that goes like this. Takes, here, queen takes d6, nice move, emphasizing white's lead in development and the weakness of that pawn. Queen takes, here, and you just take, and white's a pawn up, really for nothing. He's got a good game and a pawn ahead here. So that's what he should have played. But no big deal. It's a 45-minute game. It's not easy. And that has a double attack. It makes sense. Black defends. And I'll just zoom through some moves here because he's really asking about the situation that happens at the end of the game. By the way, black could have, instead of playing rook d8, he could have just grabbed this, as it turns out, with an equal game. Whereas now it gets more difficult to take after a while. I think he's still okay. But yeah, now white should just play a simple move like this. And he's got some pressure. He's got pressure on e7. He's got pressure down this file. But white got greedy here, Colin did. And as he said, he gave up too much for the queen. But it was a cute idea. It was a logical idea. White played here. Black had to take. White played check. Black had to take. And white won the queen. But black has two pieces and a rook for it. Now white has two pawns, and that's usually enough. You could do point count chess. Queen plus 2 is 11, and knight and 2 pieces, rook and 2 pieces is 11. So, I mean, by point count chess is okay. But usually, as long as there's a lot of pieces left on the board, that favors the rook and the 2 pieces. And in this case, especially, because look, that beautiful bishop and a beautiful bishop, and his rooks are on open active files. Your rook isn't on an active file at all. Your knight's pinned. This is knight is off center. So basically this position should be much, much better for white, except for black, except white could grab a third pawn. You start taking 3 pawns and things are getting serious, and I think he should have done that now. Probably missed that after this and this, you can't take this here because there's a trick, check, winning the rook there. Because if king here, you have check. So probably missed that. Otherwise, he would have taken an extra pawn with tempo on the rook. And now white probably does have enough. Now, even though white has 3 pawns and a queen for the 2 pieces and a rook, it's still black's okay because black is so active. But I'd say it's roughly even, just very messy and complicated. So in other words, after this, he doesn't take the pawn. He does something else. He plays something like rook a5 maybe, or maybe here, maybe knight here. That's a really good centralizing move and has ideas of going in both directions. Okay, but that's not that important. What happened in the game was a mistake, really, because now then the queen was attacked, so it had to move, and now he didn't win that extra pawn. So for example, right now a6 is a very good move. Knight e4 wasn't bad either. But the interesting thing here is why didn't black, win this game? Or why didn't black get a better game? And the general question is pieces versus queen. And the answer is that you've got to learn how to coordinate the pieces. And I was thinking that in a way, this kind of ending, pieces versus a queen, is a little bit like 2 bishops versus a bishop and knight, or 2 knights. 2 bishops versus 2 knights, or 2 bishops versus a bishop and knight, which is that the bishops are better, all other things being equal, and will win many, many games if handled right, but they're more difficult to coordinate. A lot of times it's easier to move knights, and they're easier to handle. And that's the exact same thing is true with minor pieces. The person with more pieces to handle, as opposed to just 1 queen, it's more difficult to do. And often that person will mess up. As you get better and better and you play more and more, though, and you learn how to coordinate your pieces, you'll find the bishops and in this case, 2 bishops and a rook are really able to really pretty much overwhelm the queen in most cases. And most times you'll be able to win a game like this with the pieces. Now, white won this game, so that's instructive. Why didn't black win this game? Well, let's just keep going. Both sides made some mistakes, but okay, what do you do here? Knight f5, good move. f3, knight c5, not bad, but even better would have been this. And this is typical. Now you're attacking 2 pieces, the queen and the knight, so he has to play here. And look how strong these pieces are. You've got 2 rooks on open files. The king's a little exposed, and you just figure something is going right here. Well, it really is because you have check now. And so he pretty much has to take that, and then you take, and he can't take back because of this. And probably black didn't play this because, especially with 45 minutes, he didn't play this because he was scared of this, which looks like a perpetual check. Because if you go here, you're going to lose your bishop in the corner, right? Or here, or the king can't get out, it looks like. But that's not true because you're still threatening mate, and the king can go here, and maybe it's not that easy to see, several moves in advance, 4 or 5 moves in advance, that there's no queen h4 check, so there's no perpetual, and there's no queen e3 check, and that just means black's just winning here. So that would have been very strong and would have illustrated how good minor pieces are. Instead, he played this way, back, and white played rook here. Now black could simply take this and play a6 with a very, very good game, or play knight d4, but he played there, and that did turn out to be a little bit of a problem. And here he made a big mistake. Here black has to start getting serious about this move, knight takes. So he probably should play something like this and get rid of a piece over there. He can also play a move like bishop f8, which I think he mentioned in his notes, just to cover that square. But short of time, he plays that move immediately. And that's a really bad move because of this fork. It just turns out that's a real problem. I'll show you how this goes. Okay, it's true that that's pinned, but then look what happens. The queen defends the rook and has ideas of coming out to c4 sometimes. Black checks, white takes that. Now what would happen if black didn't check? Well, that's the problem. Where exactly is black going here? This is threatened, and this guy here is threatened. And g4 is kind of an interesting move too. So let me see, what are some options besides bishop d4 check? Oh, he could still take this, sorry. That's still a decent move. Knight takes, rook c7. And then if queen check, you have this nice move, king f8, and there's no mate here. But the problem with this is that the best you're going to do after check is to go back again here and then come back, and it's a draw. So he still had a chance to get a draw. A second ago, black was practically winning. He had this wonderful game, so it's hard for him to make a decision like that. Instead of that, he checked and allowed that move. And this just turns out to be extremely strong if white plays this move, which is a much better way of winning material. Rather than win this, he wants to win this one. He's going to win a whole piece here. I won't go into detail here, but this is really just a forced win for white. He just gets too much material. So let's just see what actually happened in the game, so don't take too much time here. Okay, so now white's gotten back some material. But black still has two pieces. I'm sorry, he hasn't, because he gave him an exchange to begin with. Black still has two pieces and a rook. So taking on c8 really was not a good idea. And white plays here, but white still has a counterattack with queen c4 check. Black has a bunch of kind of loose pieces. And black plays that move, which is probably not best, I think. I think best would be to play the rook up. The idea is, how do you coordinate, how do you defend all these pieces? And one way of doing that is to play this move. And then if white plays a move like this, then you have a simple move like bishop e6. And if white plays, what else could he play, for example? A move like this, maybe go here. So where this is a beautiful outpost, and it's defended by another knight, which might also come this way. Just keep all your pieces coordinated. It takes some time and practice to get good at playing this kind of position. Anyway, let's just see what happens. He allows the check, and then things go from bad to worse here for black. It's kind of a mess. I don't know if it's worth showing too much more. Basically, black ends up not coordinating. There's a point here where he makes, oh, he gives it that pawn for nothing. That is not a good idea. And then he makes a really bad move. He was still in the game at that point because the material isn't that horrible yet. But after this move, everything's hanging. This guy's hanging, and that forces the knights back. You want to stay active, and now all the knights are passive. And white has two passed pawns really for nothing now. Well, not for nothing, but he has two passed pawns, which are very, very hard to stop because if his pieces were over here, he wouldn't have to worry about it at all, these pawns. But since they're so far away, the pawns can just start marching. And in fact, that's what happens. So let me just, oh, and now he drops another exchange over here at some point, and the game's over pretty soon. We can make a few more moves if you want to, but yeah, okay, this is over. So, good game, wonderful game. White played really well, and white fought really hard once he got the queen against the pieces, but black was better, as you thought. Black was quite a bit better, and the real question is, how do you play those positions? Really, you get a lot of practice for how to coordinate your pieces. Try to stay active. Black had some really good active options in that game that he didn't play. Okay. What do you think of the Eurosov Gambit? We've done that twice now, I think, but I will take account of that and try and show it again. I'm supposed to ask about the Alekhine defense was asked about last time too, so we need to take a look at that. Could you talk about this variation of the Alekhine? Okay, this version of the Alekhine for black. Let's take a look at this. Okay, E4, C5, C3, knight f6, E5, knight d5, d4, cd, knight f3. No, C. Oh, c takes d. Yeah, often now white is going to play this move since his pawn's not going anywhere anyway, and then make moves like bishop c4 to be more active. This is the traditional line. It's been around for a million years. I can show you how some of the old main lines go. I think everybody thinks this is completely equal for black. The way white used to try to get hope to try and get a tiny edge is to play this move. The minute he takes here, he's allowing that queen on a beautiful spot. We talked about a queen on d6 before against an isolated pawn, stopping bishop f4 and helping to get doubled. This is very easy to play for black. It may be equal, but it's very, very easy to play. So one thing white used to try, if white plays slowly, he's got to be a little worried about getting taken and maybe even a move like knight out. So the oldest move, one of the older move is to play here. And then the problem is if white captures back now with the pawn, black can either just defend that, or he can go into this endgame, which I can't remember. I think it's supposed to be dead equal. If I remember right, this is supposed to be completely equal, because white has weaknesses, but he also has a little lead in development and space. What's the other thing that can happen after that? Let me think. I'm sorry, after knight c3. Oh, I'm sorry, there's capturing, which is the old main line. And then you can either just push there. If you go here, I guess d5 is the critical move, and that's a problem. So you could go back into this old sort of position like this. This has been played before, this kind of thing. And I think white's usually pretty happy in these positions. White's playing for things like with bishop d3 and castles and queen e2, e4, that kind of thing. So after a while, white wasn't playing that at any rate. White was playing this move. And the idea is that if black retreats, for example, if black plays here, white simply castles, black develops, and white sort of swings his pieces over to the, now a lot of times you'll play an a3 in here somewhere and a bishop d3. So for example, this kind of position became common. And white would play something like this and try to weaken this side of the board, this kind of thing. It's I'm not sure if I'm getting this exactly right. My memory fails me here, but basically it's a nice, interesting double-edged position. But black in this exact order can play this old-fashioned move here, just attacking the bishop. And then if you don't want to lose in the center here, you're going to have to play bishop. You're probably going to want to play bishop here. Now, after a while, because people got frustrated with this for black, they started playing bishop here, and if black captures, playing here and allowing knight a5. Cermak or somebody started playing this. A bunch of people started playing this, but I think you'll find if you study this that black's completely equal here. White isn't going to have the bishop pair, and black's able to break up the center. So that hasn't really worked. The traditional idea was to play here, and then after that, white would play here, and black would simply play bishop here. Now that gives it the bishop pair, but the problem is that isolated pawn. The exchanges favor the defender here, and this isolated pawn is a little bit weak, and white isn't really that well developed yet. Look at these pieces here. So it goes something like this. It goes castles, e6, knight c3, and black just develops. And white's only chance to if white plays slowly here, black can just build up against that pawn. So white's best chance to get a little initiative was to go there. And now bishop h6 maybe doesn't do much, but I think it's worth trying anyway. And then you play rook d1 and hope for the best. You have some attack. Oh no, queen takes. Queen takes. Sorry. So what does he do here after castles? Maybe he just plays rook d1 or takes first and rook d1. Anyway, it's considered completely equal. You could have taken earlier too. That's the traditional line. So that's the answer in a way to what happens after c takes d, d6. I think that's why people aren't playing it so much. They tend to play this instead, at least for years they did. They tend to play this move first. And then if d6, they can throw in, for example, this move. And now it's not the same, is it? This position's not the same. Because black can't simplify. Black can't get the queens off, and black also can't exchange this bishop. And so there's a ton of theory on that. And there's, theory on other lines. But maybe that's a real quick overview. Okay. Queen takes d4 is interesting. Okay, sure. That's well, I should get to more stuff that people sent me, but let's finish this. You can also play queen takes d4 here. I've never been that excited about this. You'll see this in every tournament. Of course, I played this against Karpov, I think. Was it this position? I think it was. And is that right? I think it was this position. Anyway, then white often puts the queen on e4, and black plays knight here, and then sometimes puts the other knight back here, and sometimes plays for f5. Black wants to break up the center with d6, but the timing's really funny. So something like this happens, and then black can just play d6. That's the traditional move. And he can also play for f5. And oddly enough, the best move is probably queen e2, because you're going to play c4 and a3 at some point, but you're also going to play g3 and bishop g2 and try to have a small advantage. And then black has also played b5 here to stop c4. It's a pawn sacrifice, but fairly reliable one, I think. White doesn't always take that. I think white just plays g3 anyway. So this is all ancient analysis. I think the only problem with queen takes d4 is just a little too slow. The queen has to be kicked around a little bit, and black catches up in development and breaks up the center. However, it's completely equal. It's still played by some pretty good players. It's just not very popular anymore because it's too hard to get, when you're behind in development, it's too hard to get any kind of initiative going. Okay, so where does that leave us? Okay. Oh yeah, I like Go. I played a little bit. I really enjoyed it. Hello, John Hartman. Okay, here we go. This is great. I'm glad I have a little time here because I want to get to more things that were asked. We looked at the game, and here's this Roy Lopez question. Yeah, the other things are maybe a little too complicated, and I'll save them for next time because it's getting late. Let me just do this one Roy Lopez question, and then we can stop. EX304. And for those of you who want to learn traditional move orders in chess, this is a question right down your alley. Okay, the question's been bothering me. The maid tabia of the closed Roy Lopez. That's, oh, I obviously have the wrong game. Well, I put up the wrong game. Question is, okay, I'll just do it by playing by hand. Okay, so here's the Roy Lopez. You all know what that is, Spanish game. Some people call it the Spanish game. A6. Now, of course, this is the exchange Roy, and of course you don't have to play A6, but this is the main old line, and it's worth knowing. Some people say this is if you don't know this, you don't know anything about chess or something like that. This is the basis for learning chess, is learning the Roy Lopez. I don't really believe that, but it's a thought. Now, if we've looked at this before, taking, that's the open Roy, or the Riga variation, which we talked about. And there are things like archangel variations like this, or classical, maybe to become archangel, or bishop c5 right away. But the main old line is that. Now white defends this so that he can prepare d4. Black stops white from winning that pawn with bishop takes c6. And black can castle and try and play a Marshall Gambit, but he talks about playing here instead, d6 first. He says, a number of times and in many games I've seen h3 played. Now I've been told in all the books that knight a5 is the best reply. Notice that bishop can't get away, so you're going to win the bishop pair. And he says, because now black can get the bishop pair. When I look at all the databases, including ChessBase 2017, I see that castles is overwhelmingly the choice in spite of the fact, in spite of the fact that white has a much greater chance of winning by saving his bishop, by playing, if nothing else, going back to the main lines with c3. I guess that's the idea. Also, every engine I have states that knight a5 is the best move. Why do chess masters overwhelmingly choose castles? Okay, the main point is these move orders are very important and interesting, and that's why I wanted to show this game. I think somehow at your search, you did something wrong, though. You're absolutely right that knight a5 is better than castling. There's nothing really special white can do. The only reason that he might not be able to play that is because of d4, but it doesn't work. In other words, the reason that this doesn't work in for example, the Norwegian variation, black plays it, which is 3, knight a5 very early, and b5 on moves 4 and 5. White plays d4 in those positions and maybe can argue for some small advantage. But in this case, I don't think it might give you a disadvantage because there's still the Noah's Ark trap, amazingly enough. We're just in a standard Noah's Ark trap here, which is, however he takes back here, you've got this problem with c5, c4. And there's really no way to stop c4 here. Or if he plays knight takes, same thing. c5, c4, it just works. So white would have to actually give up a pawn, play something like c3 or something. And this kind of gambit is actually sometimes okay for white if the bishop's still on the board. This kind of gambit position is not too bad as long as that bishop has that long diagonal. But here it doesn't have that diagonal, does it? So you're just going to get this, and that's not enough for a pawn. It's not really even close to enough for a pawn. White has some small advantage, but he's playing against two bishops, and black has no serious weaknesses. So this is just better for black. So what could be wrong with knight a5? And really the answer is nothing. There's nothing wrong with it at all. Black's already equal here because black's going to get the two bishops. I wouldn't say black's better just because white's going to have space. He's going to play for d4. and black's got a few little kind of weaknesses on the queen side. So, I mean, I wouldn't really call black better, although I'm not that sure. Maybe black's already better. Two bishops is worth something for sure by itself. Okay, now the only thing wrong with your question, I think it's great, and it's a good thing to point out, is that I looked at a lot of games, and I don't think many players skipped a chance to play knight a5. I think you're wrong about that. I looked at, for example, correspondence database just to see some good players and sort of how they're thinking, and there are over 10,000 Roy Lopez Spanishes, and I got only 24 games with castles. Instead of knight a5, and thousands of games with, I'm sorry, and 120 games with knight a5. The mainline games that I saw that went like c3, yeah, in other words, these games didn't even transpose into, I included games where white transposed into the castles lines. So that's not the problem. I think from what I saw, and then I looked at the main lines, I looked at my regular Megabase and just sort of did a visual check, and it seemed to me most people, when given the chance to play knight a5, did that here. The majority of players did. But it's true that a fair minority of players threw in castles here, which is just basically a mistake. Why give your opponent a game? Now after, what else do we have here? After c3, of the main games, yeah, of the ones that go c3 first, sorry. Yeah, most games just went c3 here. And of course, a3 is sometimes played, and a4 is sometimes played. So that's the answer. I think you're wrong. Maybe your count was wrong somehow about what happens here, but your point is really good, which is, boy, throw that out there and get those two bishops. Maybe black's just better already. I wouldn't doubt it. The main thing is white can't even play d4. So that's really bad. That would be the reason for white to play this way, but since he can't play that way, it's not good. All right, so what else we got here? Can you talk about, okay, refutation of Smith-Morra. Claims this is a way to get a free advantage. We'll do one more. It's getting late, but we'll throw one more in, right? Because this is a pretty simple one. And I've piled up a bunch for next week. Please keep sending me things. AskIamWatson@chessclub.com. Here's a question about the Smith-Morra, which is fun for everybody to play on any level. Goes like this. And is it knight c6 first? Let me see. Knight c6 and d6 second. Yeah, so this is the tradition, one of the main traditional defenses. And a6, I assume. Yeah, a6 is a big move here. Castles, knight f6, queen e2. Yeah, but does white play queen e2 now? I think not. For one thing, this is a move now. If you've played this exact order, you do have to worry about this move. This is a potential move order that has to be considered. But I think this is probably fine for black. Okay. So do they play this right away? I guess they do. What else do you have? Well, you have bishop g5 lines. That's right. Some people recommend bishop g5 lines here. Okay, queen e2. You're asking about bishop g4, which of course threatens knight d4. And the other thing it's going to do is you're going to play e5. For example, if bishop here now to stop knight d4, I think e5 is a strong move, or rook c8, or knight e5. I'm not sure what's better. Not knight e5, because of knight takes knight. But rook c8 or e6, maybe e6. Yeah, black's gotten his bishop out in front of the pawn chain. So what white does here, what does white do here? Yeah, you're threatening this. So he says this is a refutation. I guess you have to play rook d1, which is sort of a normalish looking move. And then can black play e5 now? With the idea of knight d4? You could always just play e6. So let me see. I think the point is with this exact move order, white does something else. Now, is it e5? Or bishop g5? Or bishop f4? Let's look at this. Someone look this up. Someone's got to look this up. I should remember this from the old days. I just don't remember. It seems to me queen e2, bishop g4, you might be right. Maybe black is better. I'm not sure. So maybe that's why some people play this at an early stage here. We should look up Esserman's book. Mark Esserman has a whole book on the Smith-Morr. He's beaten great players with it. And that would tell us what to do in this exact move order. I don't think that's playable yet, is it? How would that go? Something like this, and then just bishop e6 or something. Yeah, that can't be good. Okay, so what does white do here? Does anybody know? Last question of the day. Bishop f4? Okay, we'll believe that. I'll give you a whirl. Now, why can't he play bishop g4 anyway, though? Is there a bishop f7? No. Is there a queen b3? Yeah, that's the difference. Bishop g4, if it allows you to go that way, see the problem with queen e2 bishop g4 is you didn't get any tricks involving putting the queen over here. So I've got a feeling this line is pretty good for black, or at least quite reasonable for black. But if you play another move first, yeah, okay, bishop, thank you for that suggestion. I think bishop f4. Now after this, maybe you have queen b3 hitting b7 and f7. Is that correct? We need to have a book here, or maybe an engine too. I'm not sure if even this works, because you could play here, and if he takes it, you're losing everything, aren't you? Knight a5? Yeah, that's awful. Okay, so I don't even know what works. Yeah, e6 looks fine. Okay, well. Yeah, I mean, I guess at some point you just allow that exchange. And he doesn't have knight e5 here. That's the difference. Aha, okay, so that's why bishop f4 is a good move. Thank you. Does anybody else, Tomek, do you know any of theory here? You know just a few more moves after, so let's say knight f6, after 7, knight f6? Do we have anybody else who knows any theory here? I don't actually know the theory here. Queen e2, this is the normal setup for white, is there followed by rook d1, but it does seem to me the timing's funny because of this move, unless I'm just missing something really obvious here. I mean, you get that move, I assume you have bishop f3. This would be a mistake because of knight takes, I assume. Even that's not totally clear because you can take it back. You can't take the queen because of bishop made. But even this strikes me as unclear. Yeah, I don't even know why. so e5 is definitely wrong. Okay, so what about h3 right away? Then we have to worry about knight d4 and bishop f3. Okay, so here's the difference. This time you have knight here, and you just take that bishop, but there's no bishop takes knight. So that's why bishop f4 is better than queen e2, it seems to me. Unless you have another move here. You could play bishop f4 now. Okay, that's another possibility. But what's the idea if black now puts his pawns in the normal way, but he's gotten his pawn out in front of the pawn chain? That's usually a very good sign. Also, I'm not so sure e5 isn't a good move. e5 is a very interesting move because of the control over these squares. It looks awfully sound to me. Oh, e5 b4 is a good move. Thank you. See, I should have my books in front of me, but I don't. Okay, this is the last thing for today, but I think it's fascinating because I don't know what I'm talking about, which is important here. Oh, maybe not castles. So maybe e5 now? That makes that can't be right, can it? John, any idea where before is? What move number we would play that on? Not instead of castles, right? Okay, after knight f6, e5 immediately. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes. This is different, isn't it? Oh, but wait. No, that's the one I was just looking at. Oh, do you play queen b3 here? This is sort of hard to believe for me. I don't know, John, if you want to keep talking about this or if it's that easy to do, but it seems to me, don't you have to take on e5? You have to take on e5, surely. Can white possibly have enough compensation here? Even if doesn't seem right. Maybe it's e5 and queen b3 or something like that. Okay, so e5 takes queen b3 maybe? Now we're threatening knight a5. Yeah, I don't know. And Lime Rock too has that whole book on it. I feel very ignorant here. I've got Lime Rock here. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll stay on a second. We might as well solve this. A lot of people love the Smith-Morra, and Smith-Morra could be a nice weapon. I mean, Esserman's a very, very strong player, and he's played against the very best. He played against Anand in Gibraltar and won, I believe. I believe he beat Anand. He may have only drawn, but if he did, it was lucky, a lucky draw. I think he won the game. Not sure, um, or should have won, one of the two. I know he didn't lose. Um, yeah, let me think. Yeah, I don't. Anybody know offhand? John, maybe you can take a look at this. Anybody else got a book in front of them, or know the variation? Tomek, you play this, or you play the black side of it? I don't know. Who asked this question to begin with? Oh, there we go. Okay, if I don't get an answer quickly, I'll have to just cop out and show you next time. Yeah, Anand did play. Yes, pass. You're right. That's exactly right. Anand did play that. Very good. He played knight f6, but he got a bad game, didn't he? But you're right. He chickened out of it, and that's sort of an interesting answer. Yeah, that game went. We'll come back to this position, but that game went. My fault. I'd forgotten. But he has played it against some very strong players, GMs and things. Esserman has. Thank you. Yeah, Anand played knight f6 here and went back into this kind of position. And I think it was a knight f3 game, but I'm not sure. Yeah, it was some sort of e6 line. And he got in trouble on the dark scores on the king side. I remember that. A lot of trouble. Okay. So back to this question. We'll give a few more seconds. John Thomas, any idea? Well, these are for sure moves, right? Right up to here, we're for sure. These are all normal. He may have a special ordering. Oh, bishop g5 now, I believe. That's what a lot of people play here because they're trying to avoid all that Taylor stuff. Yeah, I think bishop g5 right now. This is coming back to me a little bit. I think this has been played some. Am I right with that? Here we go. John Hartman, bishop f7 followed by knight e5, but when? Okay, we can take a look at it. Let's okay, a6 castles, knight f5. Okay, so you're saying can you play bishop f7 here followed by knight e5? I don't think so. Doesn't the king just move anywhere? Yeah. You aren't. I think I've got your question wrong. Yeah. So this doesn't work. I think they play bishop g5 very early, either after castles, bishop g, knight f6, or even right away, as sort of a preventative move, stopping e6. I think this has been played by some pretty good players. Doesn't mean it's that great for white, but it's something to play that maybe keeps things more flexible. But let's take one more look at this. Castles, knight f6, and maybe bishop g5 now. Yeah, John, I do recall that. That does seem right to me. That seems right to me. How can that be right? Maybe I'm overestimating this position for black. I mean, I see there's some queenside issues here. You know, a4, a5s, and knight c4s and things like that. But it's a whole pawn. A little hard to believe. Do you leave the queen on, maybe? No. Yeah. Sorry, folks. I can't find this precise move order. Okay. Well, I'll look this up. I mean, obviously, it's not refuting the Smith-Morra completely because there are books explaining what White's supposed to do here. But so I'll take a look at that. And fascinating. I feel like I should remember this just from some ancient days looking at stuff, but I certainly don't understand it. So great question, super question. So I will copy this chat, answer a bunch of questions, and get to the ones that we didn't get to today. Send me your games, send me your questions. I have a great question on pawn sacrifices for the initiative for next week. And thank you everybody for listening. So please send me your games, and remember, you can message John L. Watson if you're an ICC member, John L. Watson, or send an email to askimwatson@chessclub.com.